Hi everyone, welcome back to Kubrick Corner with me, Sean Wilson, counting down the best films of 2017. I am here again in the Watershed Cinema in Bristol, and I'm joined by Sven. Hello, mate.
Hello, Sean. Hello,
Right.
guys.
How's it going?
Yeah, all good, all good.
Good stuff.
Yeah, let's dive into this.
Yeah, so we are doing our films 5 to 1, respectively, in our best films of the year list. So, do you want to start off with your number 5 choice?
Yeah, it was also once again a film that really divided audiences. I went to see it with a group of friends, and they all hated it. And I was like, "Oh, I love this." I don't know what that says about my relationship with these people, but this is a film, A Ghost Story by David Lowery. It's a bit of a weird one because it's sort of like it starts as a ghost, literally a ghost story. Casey Affleck plays this guy who dies in an accident. This is not a spoiler. It happens in the first 5 minutes. Yeah. And then he returns to his house with like a bedsheet over his head just to haunt his wife and his house. And that is like, it is a story about a ghost. But then what it becomes after that, it becomes this whole like study of loss, of memory, and of time passing by. Because then the family, like Rooney Mara, who plays his wife, she moves out, a new family comes in. And then it becomes this sort of like testament about the passing of time, and I think it's only like 90 or 100 minutes, but it's a film that's really reaching for the stars with a lot of like cinematic means, really good, interesting score. I think the visuals are phenomenal because it's all sort of shot on like this like 4:3. Like traditional scope, like very rounded edges, as if it like the whole film feels like a relic from the past that you can't really place on a timeline. And yeah, I think it's really really interesting. Sort of like it becomes almost like Malikian, like like Terrence Malick. Like David Lowery plays with the same themes, and if you can open your mind up to something for a narrative that's really ambitious and sort of like defines what cinema can aspire to, and I'm pretty sure that you're gonna love A Ghost Story.
Yeah.
Much has been said about the scene in which Rooney Mara devours like a pie.
Oh,
it's like
yeah, in one take.
In one take. A lot of people are going on about that scene, but the film is so much more than just that scene.
Well, I interviewed David Lowery for the DVD release of Pete's Dragon last year, lovely guy, and he alluded to this film. He said, I've just done this weird little movie with Rooney Mara and Casey Affleck. He was quite general about it. I think he literally just stopped filming it. And yeah, he's a really, really interesting director. I mean, to go from Pete's Dragon to this is very, very interesting. But I love the fact you mentioned the score by Daniel Hart, because they are brilliant collaborators together. They are really, really interesting. Yeah, it is a very unusual film. I mean, it was released in August in the UK, and August this year wasn't great. And then that was like an oasis in this like desert of just like bad films. I was like, wow, at least I've got something that has challenged me and that I'm being forced to think about, which is great.
Yeah.
So, and on to my number 5 then, which is Blade Runner 2049, which is, not the blockbuster that people expected it to be, although it got critical plaudits, and one can hope that it's going to get some sort of Oscar attention next year, although it hasn't had any attention from the Golden Globes. But what else is new? That's an argument for another time. I was completely and thoroughly engrossed with this. I think, perhaps unsurprisingly, given that what you have here is director Denis Villeneuve, director of like Prisoners, Sicario, Arrival, working again with Roger Deakins, who hails from my hometown, by the way, Torquay. Big up the Torquay massive. Torquay's finest export, along with Fawlty Towers. Just creating this extraordinary, like stupendous, all-encompassing world in the manner of Ridley Scott's original movie, yet also moving the narrative ahead into uncharted areas. And I think, personally, if it's not a better film than the first one, it's more emotionally direct. I think by anchoring it in Ryan Gosling's character, I won't give away any particulars, but Ryan Gosling's performance was really captivating in this, and I thought really emotional and really subtly done. And I think that the first movie, the original, was more aloof. I think this one had more of an emotional connection with it, and the idea is that you both embrace the past and yet you also put it aside and move on was dealt with very, very well. And yeah, just I mean the script by Hampton Fancher and Michael Green, I saw the film twice. So I felt I had to see the film twice. It's like 6 hours of my life. It's obviously a 3-hour film. That came out more. The nuances of the script came out more the second time around. I think it's a really well written film as well. That's not to be underestimated. In addition to its technical assets.
Unlike many sequels nowadays, it's not just like a lazy retread of the first one.
Exactly.
It could have been that, and I was a bit afraid that it was going to be that. But I do think it expands on the original in very interesting ways, and it asks some of the same questions. It doesn't really give an answer to that, but it also asks some like really new questions about like humanity and AIs and what it means to be like human. It's a very ambitious film. It flopped at the box office. Well, it didn't really flop, but it wasn't really the success.
It didn't do as well as they wanted.
People hoped for. But yeah, I think Denis Villeneuve, he's a filmmaker that really can match the cerebral to the entertaining and to something that is really thrilling. And I think Blade Runner 2049 is like a prime example of his skills. A lot has also been said about the whole issue of female representation of the film, and that is like a really big debate. I don't know if we have the time to go into this, because is this like a product of the screenwriter, or is this a product of the men who occupy this film, and is this where the future is heading? That is a question that is very, very complex, but I do understand where that criticism comes from.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, again, at the risk of like getting into like a very, very, very complex argument, I wouldn't agree with that, because I think the character depth is there in both the female and the male characters. I mean, particularly when you look at the relationship between Ryan Gosling's Kay and the program character that he has, which ultimately that goes down. You think it's going to go down very, very sort of the troubling routes, and then all of a sudden it becomes about the awakening of his character. But I think all of this conversation is clearly has come to the forefront in light of what's happened in Hollywood over the last couple of months. But maybe a breakout video, maybe a breakout video for that. But I think fantastic film. Yeah. So your number 4.
My number 4 is actually a film that's been that topped both Sight and Sound, Film Comment, and Empire's list as the number 1, which I think is a very rare feat, because Empire is a film that's more embracing mainstream film culture.
Yep.
But this is the film, Get Out by Jordan Peele, which I think is like a terrific genre film that really expands from being just a genre film to be, it's a social satire, it's a thrilling comedy, a really well-directed horror film. It was entered in the Golden Globes as a comedy. Is it a comedy? Jordan Peele said it's actually a documentary. I think the way how it tackles race is very interesting. It uses those genre conventions, but completely subverts them and into something that feels fresh and engaged. I'm pretty sure this film is going to pop up later, so maybe we can just
I'll try not to go into it. Suffice to say, I really liked it, but it will turn up imminently. My number 4 choice is Call Me by Your Name, which I thought was just a beautiful remix. Again, we mentioned in the previous video that 2017 has been very, very good for LGBT representation, for diversity representation. I think this film demonstrates that as well. So it's adapted from Andre Ackerman's novel by Luca Guadagnino. It's a 1980s Italian set romance between a young character played by Timothée Chalamet and a much older character played by Armie Hammer, and it's all about that transcendent moment where at a young age you're drifting through life, and then all of a sudden someone ignites that spark where you don't expect them to ignite it, and it completely throws you into an emotional headspin. And what's it like to be in that situation? And it's funny enough, I read the book actually about a month ago. I saw the film before I read the book. I then read the book afterwards, and the movie does really get brilliantly into the head of the central character. Obviously, a movie being external, it has to externalise the emotions in terms of the landscapes, in terms of what everything looks like. Visually beautiful, visually ravishing, but the reason why it works is because the depiction of the gay romance is really well done. It's really sensitively observed. I loved what I keep coming back to whenever I think about this movie is the contrast in physicality between the two actors. Like Timothée Chalamet is like quite sort of rangy and gangly, and Armie Hammer appears to be the embodiment of the masculine ideal that is at the subject of the movie. There's a lot of talk in the movie about classicism and like classical beauty, and like the physical contrast between the two actors I thought was very, very compelling and very well brought out by the director. Beautiful soundtrack, and Sufjan Stevens has got some songs on it, and just got a really wistful, nostalgic. It's one of those movies that after this summer things were not the same again. That's what I always find that very powerful.
Yeah, there's
very
sort of like a
thing.
whole sub-genre, you know, those films that really observe one summer that completely changes.
Yeah.
Like if that title or that title wasn't already taken, it could have also been called My Summer of Love.
Yes.
I'm quickly just going to skip my number 3 because I want to talk about my 2, which is also called Call Me By Your Name. So then we just have this out of the way. No, I absolutely adore this film. The way how Luca Guadagnino looks at this relationship. It's sort of like two satellites that are all of a sudden in each other's orbit and they circle each other, and then they go like completely different ways, or will they reunite? And it's sort of, I think it's really, really, really well done. He takes a step back, lets the relationship play out. It's very pure and tender. But although that's the main crux, that relationship between these two characters, I think it's also a film about a lot more. It's a film that is about that whole summer, that summer of romance. It's also a film about parenting.
Yes.
Because you didn't really touch upon that.
With the Michael Stuhlbarg.
Michael Stuhlbarg.
Who was extraordinary.
He plays Timothy Chalamet's character's father. And the way how he handles his son's sort of like feelings, I think, is beautiful, and it's beautiful, like beautifully rendered in this like one monologue towards the end of the film, which I think is maybe one of my favorite scenes of the year.
I think that's one of the best parental speeches I've ever seen in a film, in terms of it not being sanctimonious or fake. Like you don't believe that this is a character spouting movie dialogue. You actually believe this is a father talking to his son about very complex emotional issues. Like
it's a film that's completely like from the start suffused with like lust and longing, and in every shot you kind of feel that that vibe, and it's quite interesting because the cinematographer is a Thai. I don't know if you know this. So this is a Thai cinematographer who did the films of Achita Pangwe Satakutil, Uncle Boomy, who can't recall his past lives, and such films. So that is from like a completely different plane of filmmaking. Yes, but it shares those sensibilities. So
fantastic. Yeah, well, it's a very tactile and very beautiful film. Yeah, I mean, obviously that we're completely in tune with that. So that's your number 3. So.
No, that was my number 2. So let me quickly go back on my number 2 because you listed this film earlier, and that is Dunkirk.
Right.
I think we saw already covered Dunkirk by now. It is a very, very tactile and visual, in-your-face experience. I've seen it a couple of times in the cinema. I do think when I would watch it on a smaller screen, I think it would lose a lot of its impact, because it's a film that lives by the grace of the biggest screen you can find. I do want to watch it again, probably over Christmas. I know it's going to come out on DVD at some point. So I'll watch it again.
I went to the IMAX premiere at Waterloo. I mean, you couldn't get a more extraordinarily immersive experience than that. I mean, literally, as soon as the first gunfire goes off within the first few seconds, I literally carried in my seat like that. I was like, okay, I'm in this for the long haul now. I can sort of get the measure of what sort of film it's going to be. But yeah, so it's actually interesting, isn't it? Because in talking about the technical aspects of what Nolan does, I think it takes it to the next level. Would you say, in terms of like how he immerses you in the drama? It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely, as I say, it's very, very kinetic, and how he's doing that with all just a means of cinema.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, that's your number 3. My number 3 would be, actually, this is the first time I think we're diverging on this. We haven't diverged yet, which is quite remarkable for a top 10 list. We also haven't overlapped either. The Red Turtle, which I was absolutely bowled over with. I know that you weren't necessarily. I saw this here at this cinema. Obviously, I mean, the vast majority of these films I was very, very lucky to have seen at this cinema, which is just a beautiful environment to see these films in. I saw it in the screen next door, and I was just completely, forgive the pun, swept away by it. It's a French silent animation backed by Studio Ghibli, directed by Michael Dudok de Wit, about a sailor who is shipwrecked on an island. and who who endeavours to leave the island on a raft, but then his efforts are stymied by the red turtle of the title that keeps destroying the raft that he makes. And what then ensues is a very, very, very complex, very hugely emotional and transcendent parable about our relationship with nature and our relationship with spirituality and with
plays
life
in
and
the
death.
Universe. It's a
Yeah,
film that's really with like tackling ambitious themes through like the scope of his like one man and his turtle. I wish that I liked it a lot more because I know a lot of people really loved this. For me, it was just a bit. It felt a bit flat and a bit too wishy-washy at times. For me, it lacked sort of like the heart of like a Ghibli film,
Right?
Because it's sort of like co-produced by Ghibli, but I didn't really feel the emotional impact. It was a genteel film.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. It's that's really, really fascinating because I kind of thought, again, I was stunned by it. I cried twice. There were just moments of like poetic awe in it. And when you combine, again, it's silent. I mean, the hand-drawn animation I thought was extraordinary. It's extraordinarily beautiful. Obviously, it being a silent movie, that throws more emphasis on the music. Laurent Perez-Delmar's score, which sounds a lot like Ennio Morricone in his most heavenly sections. I mean, that was amazing. I remember that I think there was a young child sat in front of me, and she actually started crying at something, because there are some very dark implications in the story, particularly, as I said, about how man relates to nature. There are some quite brutal bits in it. I mean, I believe it was a U or a PG certificate movie, and it's quite tough in places. So I think maybe it skews to the older sort of end of the spectrum. But no, I was absolutely stunned by it. I thought it was a beautiful piece of work. But now, Hannah and Rob's together. So we were into this. Yeah.
Is it number 2 or number what?
It's so you did your number 2. So
I've already done my number 2. So I think maybe you do your.
So if I do 2, okay, yeah. So mine is Moonlight, which is an interesting one because I know technically it could be cast as last year. What I tend to do with these lists is I do between 1st of January and 31st December in the year of release, and I believe this came out in February. Although I did see it at the 2016 London Film Festival, I was lucky to see that. Just extraordinary piece of work from Barry Jenkins about 3 stages in the life of this young black character, Chiron, in Florida. And it awakens all of this, adapted from a stage play, but it doesn't feel theatrical. It feels beautifully cinematic. I mean, there's the cinema we're talking about, Call Me By Your Name, feeling tactile. This is a beautiful film. And just the shades of blue and the sort of the transcendent air of the visuals is strong enough on its own. But also what it does is it raises very, very interesting issues, I thought, about personality. And given that it follows 3 stages in the life of the main character, at what stage does your personality solidify? At what stage do you become you? Is it when you're a child, when you're a teenager, when you're old? And this is like a recurrent motif throughout the whole movie as we follow this character at various stages of his life. I thought extraordinary performances from the 3 actors playing the main character. Again, Naomi Harris, Mahershala Ali, who of course got the Oscar. Absolutely fantastic movie.
Yeah, it was my number 1 last year, so that's why I didn't include it this year. I wish I could, because I think it's a classic for the ages.
Yeah.
It's so sensual, and just as Call Me By Your Name really suffused with like lust and longing.
Yes.
In every shot. Because Barry Jenkins, he is a filmmaker who has named filmmakers like Claire Denis and Hao Xiaoxian as his influences, and you can really feel that because the film has this very tactile texture throughout. I think really, really interesting cinematography.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful to look at. It feels a bit like a Wong Kar-wai film.
That's a really interesting comparison.
At times, but it is its own thing. I think Barry Jenkins is a talent to watch out for, and I can't wait to see what he's gonna do next.
Likewise, yeah. Well, drum roll.
Okay, are we on to our number 1?
We're on to our number 1. So, what is your number 1 film of 2017?
My number 1 is The Handmaiden by Park Chan-wook. I've seen this film now 3 times in the cinema, and I think I've also seen it on DVD. Yeah. There is a lot going on. I don't want to delve into spoilers. It tells a story about this handmaid who works for this like mischievous figure, and she has to find something out but then you never really know who is playing who, and it's sort of like really a lot of like double crossing. This comes from Park Chan-wook, the visual like talent behind films like Old Boy, and it's a very rapturous experience. It's rapturous, it's sensuous. There's a lesbian sort of like love affair. It's also like very explicit for something that is fairly mainstream. But I think how the sex scenes are handled, it's really tender and gentle, and it's just really beautifully done. Yeah, I already mentioned a South Korean filmmaker earlier, and I said about like this magic trick with like a cup, and you never really know what hand you're looking at. And this is what Park Chan-wook really excels in.
Yeah.
He has showed us before with a film like Stoker. You never really quite know what's going on. It's what a director basically needs to do. He needs to play tricks on his audience, and that is what he's really good at. Yeah, I was completely enraptured by this film. Also like a beautiful soundtrack that I've listened to on repeat.
That's on my top 10 soundtracks of the year.
Yeah, and although I've seen it now a couple of times, I can't wait to see it again. I know for some people it didn't really work. Some people thought it was a bit mechanical. How the plot twisted and tied itself in too many knots. I didn't really think that was much of a problem.
Will you hate me if I said I've actually interviewed Park Chan-wook for Stoker? I've actually sat on those kind of like I'm looking at the director of Old Boy. I'm like that was a very special moment. That was a very special moment for me. But it's a fantastic film. And again, it's about role play. It's about artifice, isn't it? It's about that plays into the score as well. The score's got
it's a big metaphor for cinema.
Exactly.
You know?
Yes.
Role play, metaphor.
It's. I think that's a fantastic choice. And I saw it again. I saw it here at a preview screening at the Watershed, and I think the audience were very on board with its playfulness as well. Fantastic choice.
Now your number one.
My number one is, as people may have guessed from given what we said earlier, it is Get Out. I don't think I've seen a more confidently realised movie this year in terms of a director who is so completely in control of his own material. Right director, right material, everything about the film works. Script, direction, acting, music, cinematography. It all comes together to really subvert our expectations of what we think this is going to be about. It's not about overt racism, it's about covert, liberal-fronted racism. That's a much trickier thing to try and handle. It's much more insidious, it's much more creepy, and that earmarks the movie's intelligent sense of satire, the fact that it is a satire, it's a comedy. It sends up social anxiety as its own form of perverse comedy. And it is very funny.
So it's very reflective because we laugh at it, but then we feel bad laughing at it at the same time.
Yeah,
and that's what he's after.
Jordan Peele holds a mirror up to society and dares you to look back into it and go, because the old idea was he was meant to be challenging people who didn't think they're racist. That's one of the aims with it. But just in terms of, again, as a satire, as a piece of social commentary that sort of encapsulates a lot of where we are in the world at the moment, brilliant. As a piece of entertainment, it's ridiculously entertaining.
Because it riffs on those genre conventions.
Yes, like Stepford Wives.
In a very smart and clever way. Not just Stepford Wives, but also like things like the Romero films.
Yes.
He has cited them as references, and you can really feel that.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
It's a film made by somebody who's very cinema-wise.
Yes.
Who knows film culture true and true, and uses all these old resources to tell a story that feels really fresh and urgent.
Yes, that's the word.
I think that is a very good choice, and it's no surprise to see why it tops all these like top 10s.
Oh no,
because Jordan Peele, he did comedy sketches before, but he has successfully translated his knack for comedy into like a long feature film. Because that sort of like slice of satire was already like present in those like short sketches, but like it was very successfully that he transported that into like a long feature film.
Well, and then the final thing is Daniel Kaluuya's central performance, Golden Globe nominated. Fantastic! How great to see Daniel Kaluuya, who first came to notice, I believe, in Skins, which was filmed in Bristol. So to bring it back to the Bristol connection, fantastic performance from him, and really looking forward to seeing what else he's going to do.
Okay.
So, Wow.
That was quite a whirlwind.
That was a whirlwind.
If you haven't seen these films,
yeah.
you have a lot to dive into. A lot of these films that we have mentioned are already out on DVD.
Yep.
If you don't really know what to ask for Christmas or for in the new year, there you go.
Watch this video. we've got it all covered. So yeah. Well, Sven, here's to a great year of movies, and here's to another fantastic year next year.
Yeah, we'll see again. We'll see each other again next year.
Yeah, and happy Christmas and New Year.
And to you as well.
Yeah, and to you guys. So thanks for following me on Kubrick Corner. Give me a subscribe and drop me a comment with your favourite films of 2017. See you soon.
Ciao.